Gambling addiction is one of the only addictions that you can completely hide from the people who are the closest to you. There's no sound to a gambling addiction. There's no smell to a gambling addiction. And there's nothing that's written on your face that says that you need help. Today, we're speaking with Andrew, who suffered from a gambling addiction for 14 years because of the fact that it's so silent. I mean, this led to him stealing checks. It led to him having multiple relapses. And it led to a night that could have changed everything about his future. And so today, Andrew sits down with us and shares his journey, what this actually looked like for him, what recovery required him to be honest about. And he gets vulnerable with us about the things that he had to do to change. This is our conversation with Andrew. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Andrew, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, man. So Andrew, you've got an interesting story, and we're here to dive into all of that today. Um, in fact, one of the things for you in particular with your relationship with gambling and whatnot has been that it started for you at a pretty young age. Can you talk to us first off? Tell us about how you're doing right now. How are you with gambling right now? And then we'd love to hear about how everything started for you as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So right now I'm doing pretty well. I mean, I have on my page and I've announced it publicly that my last bet was in December. But I'll get into all the specifics of that because my story is a bit complex. It's very layered. It's not your traditional Gamblers Anonymous story. But for today, and I always stress today I'm doing very well. Because I know this addiction, it can get me tomorrow. I've seen it take down, fellow brothers and sisters of mine that they thought they were in a good position, and then they fall. And I was in that position 2 years ago, and of course I'll touch on that as well. But yeah, like you mentioned, I started gambling at a very young age, at the age of 16, in high school, like most people. You start off in high school. And yeah, it just through the years it got worse and worse for me. And um, I'm in a position today that I'm very blessed that I am not the same version of myself that I used to be. And that's because of the tools and the knowledge that I've learned of from sponsors and program and meetings. So I'm extremely blessed to be where I am.
Do you remember any particular moment where the concept of gambling was introduced to you?
Oh yeah, that's such a good question too because gambling entered my world very, very young. I mean, beyond the 60, I always say that I started off when I was 16 just because I was very cognizant and in control of my gambling at the age of 16. But my mom introduced me to gambling at a young age with lottery tickets. I mean, she would buy them scratch offs specifically, and she would bring them home from work. And I have two siblings, and we would all scratch them, but I just fell in love with it. It was like the greatest thing ever, and they were a bit indifferent on it, my siblings, but for me, that those were my earliest memories of gambling. And I can't say I was addicted at the age of 10 or 8 or 7, but I mean, I was aware of what it was. It was an opportunity to win money on something that was inexpensive.
So you were dealing with the scratch offs. You're seeing the scratch offs. Was that the first thing that you actually started to interact with in the world of gambling, or did it take a different form for you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was the start of it. And I was always just kind of a ambitious kid chasing money. I was in school. I would sell my own video games and sell candy and come up with any sort of way to make money. And when I was exposed to scratch offs, I thought, well, this is going to be the easiest way I can make money. You know, eventually I'm going to buy a winner. So this was my pre-16-year-old brain was thinking this. So it's almost like the foundation of gambling's tentacles were already there and waiting to spread like a cancer, because once I turned 16, it was poker, poker, poker was just occupying my mind like every day.
When you say it was occupying your mind every day, poker in particular is an interesting one because uh, i there's room for you to have a little bit more control, or at least the illusion of control in terms of what the actual outcome will be financially.
Mm.
But what was it exactly about poker that was on your mind? Were you thinking about the game itself, or what do you think it was?
I think all aspects of it, you know, the game, I love the game. I love the competitive angle to poker. To me, I was never good at chess, so I figured like this is my version of chess. And I mean, I don't know how old you guys are. I'm 39 years old. In the early 2000s, there was just this sweep of poker on TV, and I've heard a lot of people share this testimony how, you know, ESPN was promoting it, the Travel Channel, and I just became obsessed with this. I was like, these are my Michael Jordans, my Patrick Ewings, like all my guys that I used to love with sports, but flip it into the poker world, and they became larger than life personalities, all the pros. So I just wanted their life. I said, forget, you know, hitting a 3-pointer at the buzzer. I want to catch a card on the river in Vegas and have my family be there, my friends be there. So the dream world of a compulsive gambler was rooted deeply into my mind at the age of 16, only a sophomore in high school at the time. Um, and then I just got swept up by the wave, man. I tell you, it was just the ESPN, the channels promoting it. Everybody started playing online poker. My house was a hub for home games. So you know, I was treading water. I was treading water, and it was rising quickly.
I do remember when gambling became really popular because, poker became really popular because I was a sports guy myself. And I do recall that exact push that you were referring to where seemingly out of nowhere it became very popular on the sports networks. It could have been a harmless partnership, who knows, but it definitely did take over. And that's really what got the whole concept of poker even on my radar. And you were right. They were really pushing a few key faces. I don't even remember the guys' names, but I do
Yeah.
remember them being thrown on my screen a ton of times. I just didn't go down that path. And now it seems like that's also the same issue, but now it's like actual athletes that were already on the screen anyways. It's pretty insane how far it's really gotten. So what's the evolution from you're playing poker to becoming addicted to the game? Did you experiment with other types of gambling, or was it primarily poker for you?
Um, are like, just to kind of clarify, when you say addicted to the game, do you say specifically like poker or gambling as a whole?
So I'm just curious about how the evolution from poker to, because there's some people out there that don't even see poker as gambling, believe it or
Sure.
not. So what I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand is like the evolution of where it goes from being a game and then into where you're seeing I'm addicted to this, and were there other elements that
Oh,
played into that?
yeah, that's very well said. I think from Jump Street, it just became an addiction. Like it was never a game to me. It was like the world. It was I need to be supreme at this kind of mentality. Um, and you know, I always knew about poker even before my high school years of Texas Hold'em, because Texas Hold'em became in fashion. But I was playing poker, 5-card poker with my family, so I knew the rankings, I knew the hands. But yeah, to kind of answer your question, it just became like this all-consuming uh, void. I'll call it a void that I had to fill within me to be the greatest and to be, you know, even to say to be the greatest, it didn't matter. I just wanted to win the money and be financially set free. Um, and you know, as a gambler, I think that's what we hang on to. We want financial freedom, but it's such a crazy thought.
But if you got financial freedom, whatever that number was in your head,
Mm,
do you think you would have stopped playing?
no, absolutely not. I would not have stopped. And I learned that about myself in the program only. Um, because if I wasn't going to meetings, I would just be chasing a number to the moon. Because for the 14 years that I gambled, I would see a high number, a digital number, because I did mostly online gambling, and I'd hit a couple times, but I would always say, "I'm not happy with this number. This number is not good enough for me." So, yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that question because I learned through, like I said, through the program that there's no number that can satisfy my appetite for gambling. And here's a small example. My younger brother asked me once because he saw me with like a wad of Mega Millions lottery tickets. He said, if you ever win this thing, would you quit gambling? And I said, no, I wouldn't. And he looked at me like I had 8 heads. And I said, I just love gambling. So I think I kind of answered my own question there that there's no number, whether it's, however many figures from a lottery, that's going to be okay for me.
When you were gambling frequently, was it something that you shared publicly with everyone, or was it something that you kept private?
It was some fluctuation to that because when I'm winning, I want everybody to know. When I'm gonna throw heat on some major bet, I want people to know, and I would go out of my way to let people know. But boy, when you're losing, and if you're an honest loser, because I know there's gamblers out there that they're always up. They never advertise their losses, but I was a bit of an honest loser because I would tell people, "Hey, I'm down XYZ amount of money." But so yeah, there was a lot of fluctuation. And then when I didn't want people to be concerned about me, like the people that really mattered to me, my parents, my siblings, I would just hide my gambling. I would always just tell them I'm okay, like I have it under control, but I had nothing under control.
Andrew, you talk about um, this idea of being able to see certain types of addictions versus a gambling addiction. Can you talk through how a gambling addiction is different in that way?
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. It's one of my most controversial posts on my page. It got a lot of traction, and I didn't mean to offend anybody. I just simply put out my opinion. But I think with gambling, to kind of reiterate the post, we can hide it so well. We really can hide it so well, and I've heard the stories of people saying that they're going to the bathroom and they're in there for hours, and people think that they have stomach issues and you know, along comes that stigma with their own craziness to the addiction. But with drugs and alcohol, you can't hide that. It's written on your face. But with a gambling binge, you can laugh it off. You can fake to people. And I was doing this a lot when I was gambling. I would just go on my merry way and say to my family, I'm okay. I haven't gambled in a while, but I would face lie to their right to them. And I'd just taken a beating on a sports bet or playing poker all night. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just that's the ugliest aspect of this addiction. I think is that normal people can mask it so well.
Now, there was also this message that you've talked about how there's a difference also between in-person gambling versus online gambling. There's this comparison that you typically make in some of your content. Can you talk about in your own life how you saw if you were you ever gambling in person at all, or did you ever really go into casinos, or was it always online? And how do you
Yeah,
usually describe the difference between the two?
yeah. You asked in person versus online, right? Yeah.
Yep, yep.
So for me, I mostly gambled online because of the convenience of it. And it was harder for me to mask my gambling if it was going to be in person because I would have to come up with a ruse to my family as to why I was going to be gone for 9, 10, who knows, a couple days, 9, 10 hours. So for me, and I mean, now you look at today's society, they have it way too easy. I mean, you just upload a picture of your ID and your credit card, and you're in that virtual world of the casino. And it's scary the way it is today. Um, but yeah, no, I was part of that too. Um, and I was just destroying myself so quickly because it was paycheck after paycheck, rinse repeat of online gambling. And that's when I knew I had a problem, is when I was introduced to online, because the appetite for it, the desire to gamble online for me was just like around the clock. I was like, this is too easy. I don't have to leave my house. I could just put a credit card or wire transfer some money and I'm off and running. So yeah, versus, and I'll touch upon the in-person casinos, like I mentioned, it's just too difficult to just lie and be gone for hours because people would catch on. My parents would say like, Where were you all day?" Like, or "How come you weren't answering your phone?" Because when I was gambling in a casino, I was just like laser focused. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want anybody to call me. It's just me and my addiction. And yeah, no, it was definitely a place where the addiction had me by the throat.
Are there any particular moments that really stand out that were light bulb moments for you that you were actually addicted to this thing?
Oh, that's another great question. You're hitting it on the head. Um, I would say when I started stealing from my parents, I said, "Wow, yeah, this is a full-blown addiction." Because at first, you play poker with your friends and you think to yourself, "This is just what guys do. This is what high schoolers do. We play poker, we don't go to school, we skip class." It's like an identity of like a bad boy. But I crossed that invisible line when I stole from my parents. My parents were on vacation and I had an online account playing poker, and it was going through some crazy ups and downs, and I said, "I'm not going to let this stop. Now I have to win back my losses." And I think I hit like 19 of my mom's checks in her drawer, and deposit, deposit, deposit after the other. I ran up a big number comparatively for a 16-year-old. Um, but it was from that moment on I said, I'm addicted to this. There's no way out.
Was there ever uh, a bet that you made that got so big? Or rather, what was the largest bet that you can remember? And what happened after that largest loss?
Yeah, so the largest loss, I've suffered like a bunch of largest losses. I mean, they always like eclipse one another, because the stakes get higher and higher, and as a compulsive gambler, it's like you're not satisfied with that dose of drugs. Like you need that higher dose, that higher high, if you will. Um, the largest loss I had was actually 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I had a bad relapse, really bad one. Um, and I just I went on tilt. I don't know if you guys know that. That's a poker term, but I could apply it to sports betting because it's like you lose a major bet. And in this case, I lost a bet that it was gonna be a huge amount of money for me in my world, but the bet fell flat. And then I just started going on tilt, and I had 5 figures. I don't really like to get specific with figures because then we're playing the comparison game, and it's about identifying with the addiction. But it was 5 figures, and it was just lost in a matter of, I don't know, a couple of hours. And yeah, this was 2 years ago, like I mentioned. And previous to that, I put 6.5 years non casino gambling together. So this was a shock to my world.
In some of your content, Andrew, you've mentioned a time where you got alcohol poisoning after a gambling outcome.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through that night and what happened there?
Yeah. So I had a bet that was gonna clear the deck, so to speak. It was gonna recover all my losses if it hit, and it didn't hit. And I was going out that night with my brother and my cousins, and like any night, we're gonna go have fun. But I just said I want this night to turn for the worse. I want to end it all. And I didn't have a suicide plan specifically for that night, but if you look at the way I was drinking, you might put two and two together. And I was drinking from a bottle, um, kept drinking when I got out uh, to the bars. I just was in a rough shape, in like public intoxication. I'm being held up like a puppet. And I just had to deal with that the next day and think to myself and look myself in the mirror and say, like, this is what gambling is doing to me. Like, this is this is where it's taking me. And that's the scary thing with gambling is when it controls you and you can't control it, because there's so many of us that are compulsive and we can't control it. Um, when it's controlling you, it's like you're in a tornado and you know which way of where it's going to take you. So yeah, that night was as a result of a bet that was going to be significant for me, but unfortunately went south. I didn't win, and yeah, it's awful, awful.
In your content, you've mentioned there was a few specific things that you spotted that really kept you in that loop of gambling and being addicted to it. Could you explain what those things were?
Yeah, I would say access to cash for me was big. Anytime I had money, I was gambling it. Um, People, places, and things too. My best friend got me into gambling, and I associated with gamblers. I didn't care if uh, you were good at this or good at that. I just want to know, are you a gambler? Can we find common ground in the gambling world? I mean, these are the people I wanted to be around. But that hurt me more than it helped me because like I mentioned previously, I was an honest guy. I would say, "Hey, I've lost this amount of money. What do I do?" And I was looking for answers in the wrong places. I'm asking other compulsive gamblers, "What do I do? How do I quit?" When they would just say like, "Oh, there's, just place that next bet. You'll win eventually." I mean, they were, the crabs in the bucket analogy. They didn't want me to leave the bucket. They wanted, misery loves company, and they were the worst people to ask for help from. So yeah, I've even mentioned in my videos that I've cut those type of people out of my life because now the people that I'm surrounded by are just, my sponsor is solid. He's got 4 years in the program. My second sponsor, I call him my second sponsor because he moved away. He lives down south now, but he just celebrated, I think, 24 years. So now my network is people that got it. They know how to live life on life's terms. And yeah, with gambling, if you don't have the right people around you, you first and foremost, you're listening to an addict. And then secondly, if you're not getting outside of your head and talking to the wrong people, then that that quicksand is so much harder to get out.
Was it difficult to get away from the people? And like, were there conversations that you had? Or how did you really go about doing it? Did you just kind of stop reaching out to people? What did that look like?
Yeah, that's interesting because it's like three layers. It was the main poker people and gambling people. I just kind of disconnected from them, and they're in their world, they're doing their thing, and I don't think they even noticed my absence. And then there was people that I had to outright tell, like, listen, I don't gamble anymore. Sorry. Like, please don't invite me to any poker tournaments or don't invite me to anything associated with gambling. And that's just like a handful of people. Um, and then yeah, there was one major one. I I actually cut out a cousin of mine. We haven't talked for over 10 years. And it's tough to think about. It's tough to talk about sometimes, but um I had to make that decision because he encouraged my gambling. He encouraged other bad activities. And I wrote him a letter and I said, I think we're both sick in our own minds. I think you have this deficiency and he has issues with substances. And I said, I think you need help because I'm getting help. And very difficult, but he said, I have everything in my life under control. I don't really need you, so to speak. And yeah, we haven't talked since, but like I mentioned, I'm not shy to cut people out of my life. Right now I have a very small nucleus, and the nucleus is to preserve my sobriety, my faith, my well-being, and that's what I try to focus on.
Lovely. What made December 11th, 2025 the day that you stopped? Was there something in particular about that day or something that happened around that time? Like, why was that so significant?
Sure. So, like I mentioned earlier, that my story is a little bit complex, and I mentioned the 6.5 years non-casino gambling. That holds weight because I came into the program in 2017, and I put a good period of time together without gambling. But here's full disclosure, full cards on the table, for lack of a better term. But when I went into the program, I was buying and selling things. And my sponsor said, Andrew, I don't feel good about this. Like, he's like, I don't want to call it gambling. You don't have to call it gambling, but you have to make a decision in your heart of hearts if you think this is gambling. And I never thought it was gambling to go into a store and buy something low and sell it high. But it became an all consuming obsession for me throughout all my years of program. So here I was going through the years, through the motions. Andrew just celebrated 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I'm asking, people are asking me to be their sponsee. I'm taking higher positions in the program as a secretary, as a good leader of the group, well respected. But those are all up for debate, because then I gave myself up. I said, guys, I don't feel comfortable with what I'm doing. I'm going to turn in my date. Um, and this was in 2024. I said, I just don't feel comfortable with the fact that I've been buying and selling things, and it split the room. Some people were saying, oh, this is a business. You're overreacting. Other people said, if you feel that way, it's probably gambling. So, I struggled mightily with this, and it led to my relapse, really, because what happened is I was buying and selling things, and then I started hiding cash because my wife made it. She had a line in the sand moment where she said, if you ever give me cash again, because when I would sell stuff, I would give her the cash responsibly. I would do the right thing for many years. But she said to me, she said, if you ever sell something again, you give me cash, that cash is going to be no good, and it's going to be considered dirty money. And I knew for years that if I have to hide this money, because I was selling and buying things behind closed doors. And that led to my relapse, and my ugly relapse 2 years ago. So, like I mentioned, just to bring the numbers together, I did 6.5 years non-casino gambling, struggled with buying and selling throughout. And then 2 years ago, I had the non-casino gambling went completely out the door because I relapsed on FanDuel. I opened up an account, and then I gave up my date in October for the buying and selling. Again, it was like people thought it was over, but it resurfaced. And then 12/11/25, which I've advertised on my page, was a personal decision. I spoke to my therapist and I said, hey, I put myself in a work raffle. What do you think about this? And she said, you have to come to terms with that. I can't make that decision. And I said, I'm going to call that gambling because it involves uncertainty. It involves, call it what you want. It's a work party, but I'm going to turn in my day for that. So that's where I lie now with my date is 12, 11, 25.
Wow. That's super, super powerful, Andrew, to really think about the activity itself, right? Might not necessarily have to be the thing that you use to determine whether or not something is gambling, but instead your relationship with it and how it actually makes you feel could be a way.
Yeah, yeah, I've
Um,
tried to just be
yeah,
completely honest with the whole circumstances of it, whether because some people don't consider scratch offs gambling, which is crazy to me. But I consider any sort of uncertainty gambling. I mean, I could walk into a Marshalls right now and pick up a jersey and be confident that I could sell it for more, but I'm a compulsive gambler. That's going to lead to nefarious things. It's going to lead to me hiding cash, and I can't hide cash because cash is like a bullet in a gun for me. I need to use it up. I have to shoot it out and it gets shot in the casino. That's the only place I know how to throw money around. Did it for 14 years, so it's a big thing. It's a testament, I think, to awareness, and I have to be constantly aware of every little action, really.
super powerful, Andrew. Um, I am curious about the buying and selling activity. Like, was it just anything? Or like, what would your criteria for the things that you were buying and selling, and what did that actually look like?
Yeah, so there was like it was like an evolution because when I was gambling many years ago, I would buy and sell things and then gamble the money immediately. Like there was no saving it, there was none of that. And I would target like clearance racks and discount stores, anything that I felt like I could build a margin on. And sometimes I feel like a little uncomfortable to talk about this because I don't want anybody to go model this behavior. Like I should preface it by saying like, please don't model this behavior because it's although it's entrepreneurial, it can turn into an all-out obsession, and I think I have a bit of that, bug with maybe OCD, uh, and, it really hit a fever pitch during COVID because I was selling a particular thing, and that market was still red hot for years. So that's why I relapsed because I couldn't shake it. I couldn't say no. Every time my wife was telling me, "Stop doing this," I couldn't do it. I would raise the stakes. I would buy the product, store it, basically under my house or under in a storage unit, um, and it just became so hard to shake.
And were you selling these items like online? Were they things
Yeah,
that you were selling person to person, or what did that look like?
yeah, I was selling them on Facebook Marketplace, so it's just cash only deals, and like I mentioned, I can't hold cash. I just even today, if you give me $5 for a bagel and I have that $1 of change, what do you think my first thought is? My first thought, and this is how sick I am, is to put it on the lotto. Like that's me being completely honest. And I think most people will share that, even no matter how many years you have in recovery, you look at money differently. You look at billboards differently. I mean, they're like attack pieces to us when we see a billboard with fat numbers on it, so it just becomes a very crazy world that we live in when we're exposed to so much pressure to gamble.
Absolutely. One of the things that you've talked about in some of your content that I don't think we've touched on too much um, is going into debt at some point
Yeah.
to continue to fund your bets. What did that look like, and how did you get a hold of that money, and how did that all go?
Well, for me, I was, very, very blessed that debt never was something that was completely out of control for me. Because when I was gambling, I would always tell myself, it's my money. Uh, I'm gonna gamble my hard-earned money, and it's no big deal. I mean, this is what the addiction does. It just downplays everything. But along the way, I always said to myself, I'm never going to open up a credit card. And I crossed that line and I opened up a credit card. And the good thing is I didn't really completely lose my mind on it. I think it had some sort of limits, if I'm remembered correctly. And I mean, just the pain of having to pay it back and pay back gambling losses to a credit card. I mean, it was like a terrible taste in my mouth to think that this is where my life is going. My life is just completely out of control with this gambling thing.
Yep. Yep. Um, Ben, do you have anything that you want to make sure that we touch on?
Yes, with your story starting so young, I think that's one of the things that we're really trying to make very loud, or one of the many things, I guess, is that it can start super young. And I actually have a friend who teaches high school class, and he said that almost every boy in his class gambles, and they're all under the legal age to gamble. So, what do you think can be done about that? Or what makes them so susceptible to getting caught into that?
I think that I think now it's a very dangerous time to be a gambler because it's almost like, and I can only imagine that the peer pressure level is through the roof.
Mm,
When we were younger and in high school, it was probably pressure to do innocuous things, like minor things. But now getting pressured into gambling and then you have these feelings of I'm not popular or I don't fit in because I don't gamble, I think is extremely dangerous. Um, I think it's such a complex problem that it's almost like the schools have to step up. The schools have to have an outright gambling education program. Because last I checked, they had Dare. When I was in school, they had Dare. If it's not being talked about directly, I think it's just going to be something that continues to just get worse. And if it was up to me, if I had the magic wand, I would have a class that teaches about the dangers of gambling. And I would have speakers go into schools. I think students need to hear how bad it can get. Um, but at the same time, too, it's almost like, and I've seen it, I've seen the younger crop come into the rooms and look for help and look for recovery, but they're 2 meetings and done. They'll do 2 meetings. They were forced to go in there by their parents, get a little slip sign, and then they're back out. And those are the people that really need mentors. I'm 39 years old. I still need a mentor. I still need my sponsor's guidance. My sponsor's in his 50s or early 60s, but I still need his word. And I think that's very humbling when you're my age and you're asking for help because not everybody's so ready to ask for help. And I think that's the key to recovery is asking for help as much as possible.
Very well said. Um, yeah, those are the types of things that, for the young people to, I remember having a time in school. It wasn't about gambling, it was about drinking. And the guy came into school and told his story and how he ended up basically taking someone's life
Mm,
uh, because of his addiction there. And, I mean, that's just stuck with me forever, right? Um, Tons of people that have come in to speak, but when you really have someone telling their true story of how these things impacted their lives, I do think that that's super, super meaningful. And like I said, it will always be with me, that message that he had. So I think it's very true, man. There's both to also have a place for someone to say, oh, there's someone who identifies, with this problem that I'm having or that I'm not even recognizing as a problem. And
yep.
then also this is how it can turn out if not careful about it.
Yeah, those are kind of like lasting messages. You kind of remember how impactful an addiction can hurt somebody. So it's I think the schools need it. Are they going to do it? One can only hope, but I think it's a desperate situation.
Most definitely. I think a lot more needs to be done. And I think that people like yourself that are sharing the stories openly, publicly, making it as loud as we possibly can is a fantastic first start that can hopefully force that change into place. And so, if people want to hear more about your story and the things that you found success with in your life to change the behavior, how can they find you on social media?
Yeah, they could check me out on Instagram at Andrew Recovering. I post there every day.
Amazing.
I try to mix it up with the content. But yeah, I try to just guide people to meetings. I'm always stressing meetings, and to me, there's no better way to get better than to attend a meeting. But like I say, it's 90 days. If you don't put 90 days in, you're never going to see the fruit of it. And it's like they say, I love the saying, stay for the miracle, because I stayed, and, I've had my ups and downs. I'm not sitting here at a long, sobriety date length, but I have foundational knowledge, in the 6.5 years of non-casino gambling and meetings that I put together. I learned so much about myself, and I learned just how to live life on life's terms. And yeah, I wouldn't trade my experience for the world, because I know there's somebody right now in a casino, and recovery and sobriety and 12 step is light years away from their mind. And that's a scary thing. And I feel sorry for people that have that mindset, but unfortunately not everybody gets to see the light. And my message to anybody who gets a glimmer of the light in the form of meetings is to expand that light, go to meetings as much as possible, and grow with the group, because there's so much growth when you anchor yourself to a group.
Amazing, man. Very powerful. And your socials will be linked down below. So anybody watching this, go ahead and check those out. They are in the description box down below. Well, thank you so much for your time, Andrew. This was amazing. We really appreciate you being open, honest, and sharing everything. And yeah, man, we're looking forward to following along with your continued journey.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks a ton, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Keith and Ben. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Of course. Thank you. All right.
If you enjoyed this, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. But before you go, I wanted to make sure that you knew that we built an app called No Dice and a challenge that's called No Dice 45. And this is about much more than just gambling. It's a 45-day challenge that's designed to help you build discipline, healthier habits, and a stronger relationship with money. Inside the app, you'll find daily challenges that push you to grow, tools that help you to block gambling apps and remove temptation, and also 2 completely free courses, one that breaks down the psychology and economics of gambling, and another that teaches the fundamentals of personal finance so that you can build a better future for yourself. And here's the thing, you do not need to have a gambling problem to join No Dice 45. In fact, if you don't have a problem, then completing the challenge should be easy. You can do it to support someone that you love. You can do it to challenge yourself. You can also do it just because you know that you're capable of more. After all, you really can't lose if you bet on yourself. Click the link in the description down below to download No Dice and get access to the free courses and to join me for No Dice 45.